a month that we look forward to in our congregation because of the famous Pride Parade that is held in October in Columbia. And so we have so many fond memories of gathering for the Pride Parade. If you were there last year, the fond memory of, just bundling up in the cold weather and blankets and our warmest attire and walking through the cold streets of Columbia at about, I think it was 98 degrees last year in October when we walked down, and that was at night as we followed Laura's truck down the streets of Columbia, South Carolina. But it's quite an honor to be a part of that every year and to see the city of Columbia be supportive and also be open to experiencing the parade of the images and people and thoughts and open-mindedness go down the streets of the city in which we live. And I have to admit that having experienced that for so many years, either participating in or watching from the side on the streets, there's a real emptiness to not experience that this year. And so I thought it would be great for us to maybe try to fill that hole a little bit of lacking the Pride Parade with actually tapping into a celebration of LGBT history. And for the most part today, I'm going to add LGBTQ to the conversation when I talk about LGBT history. So I think it's worth taking the time to recreate some sense of a parade for ourselves, and at least to create some sense of that experience, as we've done with other services that are really hard to do without an in-person meeting. So we recognize that it's not the same, but at least we also recognize that it's important enough to get our attention. And for this History Month, this is the 15th anniversary of setting aside a time. There was a school teacher that in Missouri that said we should have a month set aside for LGBT history and to be able to celebrate the work that's been done in the movement and to be able to look back. And the question is, why do we celebrate history like that? We have many months that are set aside as historical months. And so the question is, why do we do that? Why do we set aside a month? Why do we celebrate history? It's the looking back at events and people that have shaped us and moved us toward either progress, regress, or stagnation as a culture. LGBTQ history is the history of committing to the inherent worth and dignity of every person, the recognition of the fluidity of gender and sexual orientation, and a history of creating a space for people to be who they believe themselves to be and love who they want, as they also love themselves. LGBTQ history should make us feel proud to be a part of the UUCC and a part of the UUA. We have a rich history as UUs in connection to the LGBTQ history movement and have often been leaders on the forefront, making sure that those issues and concerns, the things that are important to that community, are brought forward to the surface. In 1969, the first minister that came out as a homosexual on a national scene was a UU minister, Reverend James Stoll. He was never able to serve a congregation again after that, but ministers discovered that it was okay to be open, that there was hope for coming out from hiding and being able to experience themselves as an ordained minister. The first ceremony of a union performed by a UU minister was a same-gender couple was done in the 50s, and it became a little more commonplace in the 70s and the 80s. In 2003, Massachusetts was the first state to legalize same-gender marriage without the decision being overturned. 7 of the 14 plaintiff couples that brought suit against the state of Massachusetts identified as UUs. The first same-gender couple to get a marriage license in Massachusetts in May of 2004 was a UU couple, and it was issued by a UU city clerk. In 1971, Richard Nash and Elgin Blair co-founded the UU Gay Caucus to lobby for the creation of an Office of Gay Affairs to highlight issues for that community. And over the past 4 decades, resolutions and actions on immediate witness have been passed at the General Assembly regarding discrimination, AIDS, the military, sexual education in public, marriage equality, Employment Non-Discrimination Act, and much, much more. Unitarian Universalism also began teaching about gay issues to youth in 1971 in the UU curriculum All About Your Sexuality, which is now called Our Whole Lives, that we've incorporated at the UUC as well. In 1991, in Brewster, Massachusetts, the First Parish of Brewster became the first recognized welcoming congregation, and today over 85% of Unitarian Universalists attend a welcoming congregation, which tells us we still have work left to do. And it's something for us to be proud of too, for we at least have 2 congregations represented today that are a part of that welcoming movement. As we know, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Columbia is a part of that welcoming movement and a welcoming church. And our friends from All Souls Waccamaw Unitarian Universalist Church are also a welcoming congregation. And not just a welcoming congregation, but a congregations that advocate for LGBTQ issues. This is one of those opportunities for us to look at ourselves and pat ourselves on the back and be grateful to be a part of a community that is landing on the right side of this issue in history, particularly when people look back on history and judge it to see who landed on the right side. A celebration of history is also, and maybe even more importantly, not just a celebration of events, but it's a celebration of people, a celebration of leaders who were generative forces in shaping that history. A celebration of leaders is what the LGBTQ History Month is all about. It's so important to highlight and remember and celebrate leaders when we are surrounded by so many political leaders who lack decency, integrity, a concern for people they serve, and possess an internal moral compass that is corrupted or broken, even if those leaders sit behind a resolute desk. It's important for us to celebrate leaders that have made a difference. And by the way, you can also participate in creating history by making sure that you vote and bringing any kind of reign that you don't want to see to an end and putting leaders in place that you can believe in. So we celebrate leaders today, historic leaders, icons in LGBTQ history. In lieu of the parade, we're going to have a virtual parade, and a few of these icons and true leaders, 6 or 7 that we're actually going to celebrate today. So I want you to do something for me. Normally you would gather at night for the Pride Parade and either be walking down with the UUCC down the streets of Columbia, down Main Street, Sumter Street, all the ways that we go. So this is an opportunity for you to sit back in the comfort of your own home and experience at least a taste of the virtual Pride Parade today as we highlight some of those iconic leaders in LGBTQ history. The first we're going to talk about that goes by is Alexander von Humboldt. Alexander was a renowned naturalist, explorer, geographer. He was quite the scientist in his day. And if you read the entire document here, you will see that he was one of the first to develop the idea of human-induced climate change. So think about that, the time period that he lived in, introducing the concept that we are still trying to promote today, that we are, as humans, have such an impact on climate change, and even that climate change is real. Humboldt was, in his personal life, struggled, had several relationships with male friends, but also dealt with loneliness, living in a time period where it wasn't as acceptable as we can experience today. And even was, in that day, slandered in the press or tried to be slandered in the press because of his sexuality. But we are celebrating a scientist like this that maybe lived quietly with his sexuality, but lived out loud with the contributions to our world and to our knowledge that he brought to our surface. So our first float in the Pride Parade today is Alexander von Humboldt. If you look up the street, you will see a very feisty and powerful Felicia Elizondo, a Vietnam veteran who became an advocate for LGBTQ issues, particularly transgender issues. Elizondo was powerful, not only in speaking out, but also advocating for change, particularly in the communities of San Francisco and the surrounding areas where Elizondo worked. And we are so delighted for the work that was accomplished by the voice that she brought to the table in so many powerful ways. And you can read so much about her and watch videos about her on the LGBT History Month website. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, she was also responsible for the San Francisco Pride Parade and its origin there on the streets of San Francisco. Our next Pride celebration is an Oscar-winning director, Rob Epstein, who is so well known for many things, but mostly for our conversation today, the Times of Harvey Milk, about the work of Harvey Milk and his life, and all of the powerful movements that surrounded Harvey Milk and what he was trying to do in San Francisco. And so Epstein is not only a powerful director and a very talented director, but focused his energy on LGBT images and themes, as you can read about in his work, in his bio. I'm so thankful that Epstein was also a professor of film at California College of Arts and is teaching young students to bring their powerful voices to the surface in their work. And I know that you might have heard me say the word powerful over and over again, and that is one of the key words to remind us that this community has power for change in what we do. The next couple is Manaka Guruswamy and Arundhati Kaju, two lawyers in India who really, if you look back in over the past few years, they are often named as just about solely responsible for the overturning of a Supreme Court ruling in India of criminalizing same-sex marriages. And they were responsible for leading the parade of cases and law, and still creating law around how to navigate that, even though in 2018 that Indian Supreme Court decision was overturned. This is a powerful couple that live out their lives together in their own love and relationship, but also paved the way for so many in India to be able to rise above the oppression and the experience of being told what you can and cannot do. In 2019, Time magazine named them as part of the list of the 100 most influential people in the world. I invite you to learn more about this powerful couple of lawyers and the work that they've done in advocating in India. And all of these that we are celebrating today in our virtual Pride Parade. I hope it's not the end of the conversation, but that you do like I have done in reading about them, that you pull up more and learn more about their lives and feel the influence of what they brought to the table, or watch videos of them speaking. Our next Pride Parade person that we are celebrating is Christopher Isherwood. If you are a fan of the show Cabaret, then you probably owe some gratitude to Christopher Isherwood. He was a trailblazing writer and is well known for bringing LGBTQ issues to the surface in his writing. He is a voice that really made it possible for these issues to be acceptable and written about in a way that wasn't rejected by the larger literary community. He did so much personal work and even admitted toward the end of his life that just about all that he wrote about and the characters that he wrote about was his own internal work, his own therapeutic work, trying to come to the surface and work out his own struggles in his life. He modeled for writers how to get their personal lives and their issues into the work of their literature in ways that made it relatable, but also understandable, empathetic, and moving in the opportunity to create change and change minds. So we're so grateful for Christopher Isherwood. And then our last float in the Pride Parade is a woman that I have been reading about so much these past 2 weeks. Deborah Batts was the first openly gay federal judge. And I found myself at one point this week, honestly, turning off the Supreme Court nomination hearings and just turning toward reading about Deborah Batts. She was appointed in 1994 by President Clinton and nominated for this judgeship. She always wanted to make sure that her sexual orientation wasn't the unilateral issue that was brought to the surface. She would even said in her hearings, I'm a mother, I'm an African American, I'm a lesbian, and I'm a former professor. She brought such competence and such beautiful writing in so many ways to the work that she did. And she was a lifelong advocate for equality and justice, worked with a program to increase diversity among lawyers for indigent defenders. She did not just work for LGBTQ issues, but she worked for all those who were struggling with oppression. Unfortunately, Batts died at the age of 72, and she's survived by her wife, Dr. Gwen Zornberg, and her children, Alexander and James. I invite you to, if you are aware of this federal judge that was appointed and know the name, I invite you to dive deeper and learn more about this amazing woman. In fact, I invite us all to walk away from the virtual Pride Parade today, a celebration of history, to take a break from the leaders that maybe we are frustrated with, or the leaders that lack the ability to give us hope, and actually focus our attention on leaders that can inspire us, and to celebrate their lives, celebrate their accomplishments, and celebrate their contributions to the work of LGBTQ history. Anna's going to lead us in our closing hymn.
I invite you to join me